Brundtland defined sustainable development as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. That's a very big scope, not very specific in how you do that, but nevertheless it gave a lot of people a lot to think about. And it of course was not the first time that we were, as a society, as a scientific community, challenged to think about the future of the planet, including its inhabitants. But if you think about the Club of Rome, The Limits of Growth, if you think about Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, there were several attempts in the past to draw our attention to the issue that we are not living in an environment that has limitless resources. So the motivation to discuss sustainable development, I think, are manifolds, and I'm just listing a few, and I might skip over a few that I have on the slides. So if we look at the past 3 centuries, roughly, the world population has increased by a factor of about 10. We crossed, according to UN census, the 7 billion mark. Bob already mentioned that. Energy use increased by a factor of 16 in the 20th century alone. And that increased, of course, the greenhouse gas concentration, but also other substances of the atmosphere, such as sulfur dioxide and acid rain that's combined to it, or related to it. About 30 to 50% of the Earth's surface is used by humans, anthropogenically changed, and that includes ocean. Everybody has heard about the destruction of rainforest, which not only is a problem for species extinction, but also contributes to the CO2 increase in the atmosphere. Fisheries use more than 25% in upwelling regions to 35% in shelf regions in moderate latitudes of the oceanic primary production. So we are actually harvesting a lot of what the planet can produce in terms of biomass. And last example, the amount of nitrogen fertilizer which is used in agriculture is larger than the nitrogen naturally fixed by all global ecosystems. So we are mining into Earth's resources. Now, these effects, and this is just a small example of a long list of how we have managed to impact our planet, were caused by only about 1/4 of the world population. And if we are projecting that forward, if we would go along the same trajectory, the effects of human activity on the planet would be accordingly much bigger. The consequences, as already mentioned, include global warming, acid rain, smog, just to name a few. And in fact, the role of humans in the Earth system by now is so large that a new geological unit of time, the so-called Anthropocene, has been proposed by people like Crutzen, a Nobelist in chemistry, or Salasiewicz. So what kind of challenge does this pose now for academia? We see these effects playing out around us. We see that certain components of our planet, I mean, and we have to keep in mind that, of course, there's always evolution on the planet. But there seem to be some perturbations or some part of the evolution are so out of balance that we are facing serious changes of some of the systems we depend upon. Now, for academia, it pretty much the recognition that our natural and socio-economic, socio-cultural systems are on a non-sustainable path represent one of the biggest challenges for humankind, and I think that's for the foreseeable future. That brought me to the comment to Bob's example of molecular biology. I have a hard time seeing that go away over a period of decades or even a few centuries. I think that's something that will be with us from here on out. Now, academia, of course, is the most fundamental generator of knowledge and new ideas of society, and so there is an ethical and moral obligation of academia to respond to these challenges. And there are not only challenges, there are also opportunities in facing such a situation. But it also raises the question of defining the position of sustainable development within academia. What is it? Is it an activity? Is it a field? Is it a discipline? So if we are looking at Columbia University and the position of the Earth Institute, which was the response of the university to that set of challenges that we are facing, we can say that, and this is something that goes back to former Vice Executive Provost Mike Crow, who is now the president of ASU, Arizona State University, who said there is a natural development in academia, starting with cultural core-driven components like arts and sciences core. They deal with civilization and culture. Quality of life-driven components, such as, for example, the health sciences, which deal, in this case, clearly with human health. Professional schools, which address economic and social needs of society and provide professional education. And now reaching the point where we have to think about the sustainability of our planet, which goes into the area of global citizenship and is done at Columbia through the Earth Institute. The question that I framed there in red is, what is the underlying definition of that activity, and is it really a new discipline? So we then can ask the question, why should it be a new academic discipline, sustainable development I'm talking about? So the answer could be that the questions that we are faced with, if we are talking about sustainable development, are too big to be addressed between existing disciplines or by any of the existing disciplines. The knowledge base that is required for studies in sustainable development has to be developed in a dedicated effort and be refined. It's a flexible entity and construct. And I'm now referring mainly to research. But in order to do that, I think we have to train a new generation of scientists who have the capacity and capability to analyze and address problems in sustainable development, which leads to an educational component, very consistent with the mandate of an academic institution. But in addition to many of the activities that academia took on, I think sustainable development has a very immediate need to transfer the knowledge that it has gathered into the stakeholder domain. And here I speak in a broad sense of stakeholders, including academia itself, but also the private sector, decision makers, and so on, and society at large, of course. So I think that requires a sustained, focused effort to develop research, education, and practice agendas for sustainable development. Now let's see how academic disciplines are typically defined and see how our agenda actually matches to that. So one quote is that a discipline is a branch of learning or knowledge. The word is generally reserved for a subject that is well established, has recognizable methodology associated with it. And in this particular case, examples are given, saying, for example, science, mathematics, and philosophy are disciplines. French, social studies, and drama are not. Now, you can debate that. I'm not saying that I'm agreeing with that, but that is what you find if you're looking for definitions. Another quote says, disciplines of knowledge. On the surface, it refers to a body or domain of knowledge where precision of meaning and depth of analysis are achieved by the use of distinctive concepts. And I think that's important to keep in mind. More basically, a discipline such as history, so here actually it's counted, philosophy or physics, can be seen as activity committed to the refinement or extension of knowledge in accordance with conventions about how intellectual inquiry should be conducted, and its outcomes evaluated. So that's important, that last part that is highlighted in red, that we have to develop a metrics for success. In addition to the well-defined body of knowledge and the specific methods that are used. So let's see, why are new disciplines actually created? What are the reasons for new disciplines? Again, one quote says, "The Industrial Revolution of the late 18th century began to stimulate the demand for higher education from a rapidly expanding industrial and commercial middle class." Another quote, also sort of going into that direction, says, "The revolution within the universities belatedly reflected the revolution in society at large." So pretty much saying we are following the needs of society when we are thinking about new disciplines. And you could say civil engineering actually had a component of that. The Industrial Revolution had created a larger size, more complex society based on great cities and requiring a wider range of expert services. So that's when a lot of the professional schools were created, like engineering schools, schools of public health, architecture, journalism, and so on. So pretty much following the need for a broader set of knowledge that serves an evolving society. Here's an interesting one. Some subjects gained admission into the college course not by descending from a respected ancestor, like molecular biology did, but by overcoming an initially ignoble reputation, which you could say sustainable development has. Let us call it the process of subject dignification. And they give some examples which go to the first, more rigid definition of that I brought up for disciplines, saying, English actually was accepted as a discipline in the first half of the 1700s, French in the second half. Not sure why there is this sequence, but people might have thoughts about that. And in 1819, Harvard grants the first American professorship in modern, means live, languages. And then late 1840s, applied science and engineering, came into being. So here I have some thoughts on the emergence of new disciplines. And citing from a paper by two Portuguese scientists, it says, a new paradigm is adjusted, so there are three steps. A new paradigm is adjusted to cover the various manifestations of the emerging collaborative forms. Second one is the consolidated set of basic knowledge is organized. That goes a bit to what Trish said about the body of knowledge that fields develop. And third, which I think is important, the various multidisciplinary researchers involved in this work start to identify themselves as members of this new community, rather than experts doing research on collaborative networks while staying as members of their original communities and disciplines. So it really means that you have to move into new intellectual spaces. So what would that paradigm be? I would say for sustainable development, the new paradigm is the need for a holistic study of the Earth system, including humans in the Anthropocene. So if we are then looking at, if we assume that sustainable development can be defined as a discipline, what would it do and how would it do it? What would be the subject? What would be the method? And how would we measure it? I would say that in very general terms, we could say that sustainable development is the study of the Anthropocene and its impact on Earth's finite and renewable resources, as well as its habitability. The underlying methodology is to understand, predict, and modify complex systems, which means we would be able to analyze future states of the Earth system in the context of sustainable development, and do that in a transdisciplinary fashion, which means creating true new intellectual spaces. I think if we would accept that, we also have to accept that sustainable development is similar to professional school in its mandate, which means it's there to find solutions to specific societal needs with immediate impact, and in that sense it's an applied science. That mandate, in my view, only can be fulfilled on the foundation of sustained excellence in existing disciplines, which means we are not trying to substitute any existing discipline, but we are trying to create space for intellectual activities that cannot be driven or occupied or solved by the existing set of disciplines. Sustainable development deals with complex problems that emerge in many forms, in different application domains, and consist of many facets whose proper understanding requires the contribution from multiple disciplines. So it really has to sit within those, not coming out of one or being pressed into an existing one. One could say that in fact various aspects of sustainable development have been studied by different branches of science, including earth and environmental science, other natural sciences, social sciences, humanities, basically most of the spectrum of academic disciplines. Now the acceptance here, that's a practical issue. The acceptance of a new discipline is not a pacific process, because the established sciences and paradigms tend to resist the introduction of another quote-unquote competitor, and rather prefer to extend the existing sciences or fields and their associated rules to explain the new phenomena. And I would say that in our case that might hold us back rather than accelerate our ability to find solutions to the problems that we are facing. So let me sum up to here quickly and say, based on these sort of definitions, hypotheses, and problem definition, I would say that sustainable development actually should be its own discipline, and we have to find a way to establish that. Now let's see where we are with the Earth Institute, and I try to keep that short because many of you know most of that, but I just want to see how these things would actually hang together. So if you're looking at the mission, and I'm just picking out a few of that, it's the integrated study of Earth and its environment, human society and the interactions between the two. It's based on excellence in its basic disciplines, and in the present mission which we are working on updating, the basic disciplines are earth sciences, biological sciences, engineering sciences, social sciences, and the health sciences, not including humanities yet in this particular write-up. It stresses cross-disciplinary innovation. It also immobilizes science and technology to address the complex environmental issues, highlighting sustainable development and the needs of the world's poor. Now you might wonder how the needs of the world's poor comes into that. You could argue that we never can be sustainable if we cannot equalize or if we cannot remove that strong gradient between the ones who have and the ones who don't have. Our definition of sustainable development has a strong component of the Brundtland definition. It reads, sustainable development signifies the ability of the world to narrow the gap between the rich and the poor, and the ability of all to pursue further progress in overall human well-being. That was particularly chosen to offset it against what often is meant under development, which means economic development and economic well-being. So we really would like to extend that. The world as a whole and each major sub-region ought to be able to accomplish these goals without irreparable harm to vital ecosystems, depletion of essential resources, or unjustifiable risk to future generations. So you can see the handwriting of the Brundtland definition, but there are some important additions to it. And this is something that is always evolving and will be evolving as we move forward. Now this is a complex figure, but I just want to highlight a few elements of it. So if you say, why do we have sustainable development in academia, and what is it supposed to do? The reason, of course, is that we do have increasing pressure, which is the upper left box, on the Earth system due to human activities, and we are getting a bit out of balance between the components in the Earth system. And so we need to understand these systems and find solutions to the problem of overdevelopment of the planet. How will we do that? In order to be successful at all, we have to develop the capacity to project future states of the Earth system under varying development scenarios. Otherwise, we just cannot plan ahead. If we cannot get to that point, we really cannot intelligently talk about sustainable development. And then we also have to assess how sustainable these future states are and try to move towards them compared to those that are deemed not as sustainable. As I already mentioned, there has to be an interplay between research activities, education activities, and practice. So if we look at the research side of things, we have a strong tie to departments, and typically the departments are doing a lot of basic research, but some of them also are engaging in applied research. We have what we call the Earth Institute units. A lot of them are doing basic research. There are components of interdisciplinary research. We have what we call the cross-cutting initiative. That is an initiative that tries to bind all these different fields together and sort of develop a sphere for transdisciplinary research. And then we have what is called cross-cutting centers that are focused on themes, take integrated approaches, and they are only separated out by themes for operational reasons. There is a mechanism that keeps them closely linked together to achieve a holistic approach to many questions that need it. So this picture only is up there to show you how many centers we have within the Earth Institute. So if you are looking at this picture from top to bottom, you pretty much see how long individual centers existed, and then on the bottom, the x-axis is a time scale. So some of the centers that are now part of the Earth Institute preceded the Earth Institute in their creation, but most of them are actually have been founded as a consequence of the Earth Institute's need. We have roughly 35 operational centers right now that deal with different parts of the problem of sustainable development, and they span from basic science to applied science to social science. I would actually claim in some of them we have elements of the humanities, although it's underdeveloped and not yet fully expressed. If we are looking at the educational side, we have a full set of programs. We have an undergraduate special concentration and a major. In the college, in the School of General Studies, we have a PhD in Sustainable Development, and then we have professional master's programs. For example, the MPA in Environmental Science and Policy, Master of Science in Climate and Society, that's actually a mistake, should be Master of Arts, an MPA in Development Practice, Master of Science in Sustainability Management, and under development a Master's in Carbon Management. And in orange colors you see how they were phased in over a period of more than a decade. So here you can get a sense of what the entrance into these programs is, and the different colors show the different programs. So in general, some of them, like the MPA in Environmental Science and Policy, has reached a quasi-plateau, quasi-steady state. Others are still growing fairly rapidly. We also engage in practice, and here I'm just showing a few examples which are for practice work that is done primarily through the Earth Clinic, but also outside that structure. There are issues that deal with arsenic contamination in Bangladesh and its impact on human health. There are things like a program in subsidized cook stoves in sub-Saharan Africa, because that's a big public health problem. There are some more eclectic things like transportation in Africa, and here particularly the exploration of bamboo bicycles as sustainable transportation, and pastoral education in Durtu, etc. So real programs that take what we learn in academia out into the world, see if it works. If it works, it will be handed off. If it doesn't work, it will be brought back in and will be re-examined. We have created, and I think Bob already referred to that, a group of faculty that underpins these activities. It's about 45 faculty members now that are responsible for the academic governance of the Institute. Their appointments are coterminous with their home department appointments. It's a rapidly growing body, which I will show in a moment, and all of these appointments are joint appointments. Here you can see how we held this group steady at a number of 11 for a long period of time, up to 2004, and this was simply a political decision from those who ran the Institute at the time. And then starting in around 2005, we said we really have to be more inclusive, we have to live up to our own goal of being able to treat problems in a holistic way. So we are now at 45. The different colors basically tell you regular members and associate members ex officio, which doesn't really matter for the purpose of this discussion. And these are drawn from 20 different departments or schools. So it's a very, very diverse set of intellects and allows to treat problems of all kinds of complexities in a holistic way. This just shows that, you know, it is drawn from different fields, and you can see that we are still sort of in the process of balancing between these fields. Earth science, for reasons that are specific to Columbia, has the highest number of members, but you know, we do have members from biological sciences, public health, social sciences, engineering, and so on. So let me close with a few perspectives. I would claim that the Earth Institute is on its way towards defining and establishing sustainable development as a new academic discipline. There is still work to be done. This is nothing that has been perfected or has been closed as a thought process or an operational process. But we have put components in place that will help finishing that process. We have a full educational program. We have a wide set of research activities, and we have practice programs that help us to translate our research into the domain outside academia. There's a rapidly growing community of faculty members and research scientists who provide the intellectual underpinning and the academic governance, and more that goes into a self-governance of this group. The permanent position within Columbia University still has to be determined. There is an evolution. We are the largest institute, but we are still an institute, and we have to make many links for all these programs, and some of them actually are really good, so I don't want to see that as a negative. But sometimes, especially in the creation of new intellectual space, you need some independence, and I think we really have to work on that aspect. You know, where should it be, how should it be done, how does it relate to other disciplines, so that we keep a good link to the existing base, but that we also have the freedom to explore, develop and occupy new intellectual domains. With respect to how do these things happen, sometimes there's an operational aspect to establishing new disciplines, and you know, societies usually start in a national context, but more and more in an international context. So we are exploring an international alliance in sustainable development, and we hope that this will help to bring more mass to the thought process and to the definition and the operationalization of the field. So that's pretty much where I think we are standing with respect to the fundamental question of whether or not sustainable development is or is on its way to be an academic discipline, and how the Earth Institute relates to that effort and reflects it, promotes it, or benefits from it. Thank you.